billion reasons why you should listen to this audiobook. A lot has happened to us all since 1987. That's the year The Art of the Deal was published and became the best-selling business book of the decade, with over 3 million copies in print. Business rule number one: if you don't tell people about your success, they probably won't know about it. A few months ago, I picked up The Art of the Deal, skimmed a bit, and then read the first and last paragraphs. I realized that after 17 years, they still rang true. I could have written these words yesterday. First paragraph: I don't do it for the money. I've got enough, much more than I'll ever need. I do it to do it. Deals are my art form. Other people paint beautifully on canvas or write wonderful poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. Last paragraph: don't get me wrong. I also plan to keep making deals, big deals, and right around the clock. It's now 2004. I'm still making deals around the clock, and I still don't do it for the money. I don't think you should do it for the money either. Money is not an end in itself, but it's sometimes the most effective way to help us realize our dreams. So if you've got big dreams and you're looking for a way to make them happen, this audiobook is for you. How to Get Rich. That's what I decided to call it, because whenever I meet people, that's usually what they want to know from me. You ask a baker how he makes bread. You ask a billionaire how he makes money. Sure, there have been countless how to get rich books written by millionaires. Billionaire authors are harder to find. Billionaire authors with interests in real estate, gaming, sports, and entertainment are rarer still. And billionaire authors with their own Manhattan skyscrapers and hit primetime television series are rarest of all. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, though Oprah could give me a run for the money if she ever decides to write another book and get into real estate. Business rule number two: keep it short, fast, and direct. The following will be straightforward and succinct, but don't let the brevity of these passages prevent you from savoring the profundity of the advice you're about to receive. These stories and words of wisdom have been distilled from almost 30 years at the top. So here it comes, the scoop from the Donald. After you make your first billion, don't forget to send me a thank you note. You know the address.
Simon & Schuster Audio presents Trump: How to Get Rich by Donald J. Trump with Meredith McIver. Read by Barry Bostwick with an introduction by Donald J. Trump.
Part 1. The Donald J. Trump School of Business and Management. Be a general. I am the chairman and president of the Trump Organization. I like saying that because it means a great deal to me. There are almost 20,000 members of this organization at this point. I did a print ad once in which I declared, "I only work with the best." That statement still stands. More and more, I see that running a business is like being a general. Calling the shots carries a great deal of responsibility not only for yourself, but for your troops. Your employees' lives, to a large extent, are dependent on you and your decisions. Bad strategy can end up affecting a lot of people. This is where being a leader takes on a new dimension. Every decision you make is an important one, whether there are 20,000 people working for you or just one. If you are careful when finding employees, management becomes a lot easier. I rely on a few key people to keep me informed. They know I trust them, and they do their best to keep that trust intact. For example, when I need to know something about my casinos and hotels in Atlantic City, I know I can call up Mark Brown, my CEO, and get a fast and informed answer. If I call Laura Cordovano over at Trump Park Avenue and ask about sales, she'll give it to me exactly as it is. If I call Alan Weisselberg, my CFO, he'll tell me what I need to know in 20 words or less. My senior counsel and apprentice advisor, George Ross, can do it in 10 words or less. Find people who suit your business style, and you'll have fewer problems to deal with as time goes on. Good people equals good management, and good management equals good people. They have to work together, or they won't work together for very long. I've seen good management get by with mediocre people, and I've also seen excellent people get stuck in the mires of bad management. The good managers will eventually leave, followed by the good workers, and you will be left with a team that gets along because they're all mediocre. Save yourself time by getting the best people you can. Sometimes this can mean choosing attitude over experience and credentials. Use your creativity to come up with a good mix. Creative people rarely need to be motivated. They have their own inner drive that refuses to be bored. They refuse to be complacent. They live on the edge, which is precisely what is needed to be successful and remain successful. One of my former employees was in charge of a new project. He had done a thorough and acceptable job, but I felt that something was missing. It wasn't fantastic, which, knowing his capabilities, it should have been. I decided to challenge his creative ego by mentioning that it was fine, but seemed to lack inspiration. I politely asked him whether he was genuinely interested in the project and suggested that perhaps that might be the problem. Well, the guy went ballistic on me. He was deeply insulted. And as you can probably guess, the revision he turned in was terrific. The difference between the first draft and the final version was incredible. I didn't slam the guy because he was usually demanding of himself and had never let me down. But I had to give him a jolt. Generals motivate their soldiers. They inspire them when it is necessary. They do the same for the highest-ranking officers. We all need a boost now and then. Learn how to tailor your method to the personalities you are managing. Keep the big picture in mind while attending to the daily details. This can seem like a balancing act, but it is absolutely necessary for success in running a company. Stay focused. In the 1980s, I was riding high. After learning the essentials of real estate development from my father, Fred, a builder in Queens and Brooklyn, I'd become a major player in Manhattan, developing Trump Tower, the Grand Hyatt Hotel, and many other top-tier properties. I had a yacht, a plane, a best-selling book. One magazine headline said, "Everything he touches turns to gold," and I believed it. I'd never known adversity. I went straight from Wharton to wealth. Even in down markets, I bought properties inexpensively and made a lot of money. I began to think it was easy. In the late 80s, I lost focus. I'd fly off to Europe to attend fashion shows, and I wasn't looking at the clothing. My lack of attention was killing my business. Then the real estate market crashed. I owed billions upon billions of dollars, $9.2 billion to be exact. That's $9.2 billion. I've told this story many times before, but it bears repeating. In the midst of the crash, I passed a beggar on the street and realized he was worth $9.2 billion more than I was. I saw a lot of my friends go bankrupt, never to be heard from again. The media had me for lunch. Forbes, Businessweek, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, they all published major stories about my crisis, and a lot of people seemed to be happy about it. I'll never forget the worst moment. It was 3 a.m. Citibank phoned me at my home in Trump Tower. They wanted me to come over to their office immediately to negotiate new terms with some foreign banks, 3 of the 99 banks to whom I owed billions. It's tough when you have to tell a banker that you can't pay interest. They tend not to like those words. An ally at Citibank suggested that the best way for me to handle this difficult situation was to call the banks myself, and that's exactly what they wanted me to do. At 3 o'clock on a cold January morning in the freezing rain. There were no cabs, so I walked 15 blocks to Citibank. By the time I got there, I was drenched. That was a low point. There were 30 bankers sitting around a big table. I phoned one Japanese banker, then an Austrian banker, and then a third banker from a country I can no longer remember. In The Art of the Deal, I had warned readers never to personally guarantee anything. Well, I hadn't followed my own advice. Of the $9.2 billion I owed, I'd personally guaranteed $1 billion. I was a schmuck. But I was a lucky schmuck, and I wound up dealing with some understanding bankers who worked out a fair deal. After being the king of the 80s, I survived the early 90s, and by the mid to late 90s, I was thriving again. But I learned my lesson. I work as hard today as I did when I was a young developer in the 1970s. Don't make the mistake I did. Stay focused. Maintain your momentum. William Levitt, the master builder of Levittown, taught me the true meaning of momentum. In the 1950s, he was the king. No detail was too small for his attention. He would personally collect stray nails and extra chips of wood from building sites to make sure his construction crews used all available materials. He sold his company in 1956 to ITT for $100 million, which is equivalent to billions today. Then he made some terrible mistakes. He retired. He married the wrong woman. He moved to the south of France and lived on the Riviera with his new boat and his new wife. One day, ITT called. The executives in charge of the conglomerate had no aptitude for home building. They had bought huge tracts of land but didn't know how to get them zoned, so they sold it back to Levitt, who thought he'd gotten a great deal. He went back into business, and he proceeded to go bankrupt. I saw William Levitt at a cocktail party in 1994, 2 weeks before he died. He was standing by himself in a corner, looking defeated. I didn't know him well, but I approached him hoping to acquire some wisdom from the master. "Mr. Levitt," I said, "how are you doing?" "Not good, Donald, not good." Then he said the words I'll never forget. "I lost my momentum. I was out of the world for 20 years. I came back, and I wasn't the same." No matter how accomplished you are, no matter how well you think you know your business, you have to remain vigilant about the details of your field. You can't get by on experience or smarts. Even the best surgeons need to be retrained regularly to stay current on the latest research and procedures. No matter what you're managing, don't assume you can glide by. Momentum is something you have to work at to maintain. Get a great assistant. Surround yourself with people you can trust. I often say it's good to be paranoid, but not when it comes to your home team. Ask God for a great assistant. No joke. A great one can make your life a whole lot easier, or in my case, almost manageable. Norma Forderer has been with me for 23 years. If you want to know what a great guy I am, just ask her, but not on a Friday. Handling me, the office, and several hundred calls a week isn't easy. She's as tough and smart as she is gracious. She's also indefatigable, which helps a lot if you work for me. My phones are so busy that I require 2 executive assistants, and they never stop. They alone handle, on the average, more than 1,250 calls a week. They are not only efficient and fast, but they are also very pleasant and beautiful young women. You don't have to be beautiful to work for me. Just be good at your job. I've been accused of admiring beautiful women. I plead guilty. But when it comes to the workplace, anyone who is beautiful had better have brains, too. You need competent people with an inherent work ethic. I'm not a complacent person, and I can't have a complacent staff. I move forward quickly, and so must they. Once I wanted to know how fast a new employee could work, so I told him I was leaving in 15 minutes and needed something done within that time. I wasn't actually going anywhere, but sure enough, I had what I needed in 15 minutes. Machiavellian? Maybe, but both of us learned something that day. One final piece of advice on assistants, which I learned from experience and which, I admit, may not be as relevant to your career as it's been to mine. Find a receptionist who can speak English. We had a breathtaking European beauty out front who could easily rival Ingrid Bergman in her heyday, but I discovered that her ability to recognize well-known people in the United States was limited to myself and maybe President Bush. She wasn't so familiar with the likes of Hugh Grant, Reggie Jackson, George Steinbrenner, Jack Welch, Paul Anka, Mohammed Al-Fayed, Regis Philbin or Tony Bennett. Their calls never got through to me, and their names were placed on her psycho list. But you should have seen her. What a knockout. She's since moved on to better career opportunities, but we'll never forget her. Neither will anyone who ever called in, or tried to. Remember, the buck starts here. Set the standard. Don't expect your employees to work harder than you do. In my case, I don't have to worry about that because I work 7 days a week and love almost every minute of it. But also realize that your company will sometimes function as an extended and dysfunctional family. It's only natural, considering that people often spend more waking hours with coworkers than they do with their families. A visitor in my office once mentioned that the goings-on there reminded him of a family fight in progress. I will admit that the volume level gets high now and then, and he wasn't far off in his assessment. But if you want smooth sailing every day, move to the Mediterranean. Winners see problems as just another way to prove themselves. Problems are never truly hardships to them, and if you haven't got any problems, then you must not have a business to run. Regard your company as a living, breathing organism because that's what it is. Those figures you see on your spreadsheets will reflect the health of that organism. Watch out for bad cells while allowing good cells to flourish. Growth is an indication of life, so keep your organization moving forward at all times. Having a passion for what you do is crucial. If you can't get excited about what you're doing, how can you expect anyone else to? If your employees can see and feel your energy, it is bound to affect them. Don't intimidate people. If you do, you'll never get a straight answer from anyone, and you'll be defeating your own purpose. I keep my door open, and my people know I'm available as well as approachable. We don't have chat fests, but whatever needs to be done gets accomplished, and quickly. Remember that your organization is your organization. That sounds simplistic, but bottom line, it's your ballgame. The strategy is up to you, and so are the results. Remember Harry Truman's famous words, which he kept on his desk in the Oval Office? The buck stops here? I keep a similar quote on my desk. It reads, "The buck starts here." Don't equivocate. If you equivocate, it's an indication that you're unsure of yourself and what you're doing. It's also what politicians do all the time, and I find it inappropriate, insulting, and condescending. I try not to do it. Fortunately, I don't have to try too hard at this one because I've been known to be on the blunt and fast side at times, which is good. I once asked an executive in my organization to give me a synopsis of a new development we were considering. He'd been to the city in question, had spent some time there, and had done some careful investigating. He went on to describe the merits of the site, the pitfalls, the good things, the bad things, the pros, the cons, on and on in great detail. He must have talked for 10 minutes straight. Judging from what he was telling me, there were just as many reasons to drop the project as there were reasons to jump right in and get going. It was like a tied game with no overtime. I asked him more questions, and we ended up exactly where we were before. He was on both sides of the fence at once, and didn't seem to want to take a stand either way. This guy had a lot of experience and a good track record, so finally I asked him what he thought of the project in 10 words or less. "It stinks," he said. He had 8 words left, but he didn't need them. Ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, is there anyone else who can do this better than I can? That's just another way of saying know yourself and know your competition. If your competition is better than you are, you need to offer some quality they lack. Number 2, what am I pretending not to see? We can all get swept up in the euphoria of a creative moment, or what former President Richard Nixon's speechwriters used to call the lift of a dream. Before the dream lifts you into the clouds, make sure you've looked hard at the facts on the ground. Bullshit will only get you so far. I think it's funny that the phrase most closely associated with me these days is, "You're fired," because the truth is, although I've had to fire people from time to time, it's not a big part of my job. I much prefer keeping loyal and hard-working people around for as long as they'd like to be here. There's a wonderful lady in her 90s. Amy Lewerson, who worked for my father and still reports to work every day at our Brooklyn office. Here at the Trump Organization, Helen Raycotts has worked for me from the day I moved to Manhattan, and she still puts in long hours every week. She is 82. Once I delayed firing someone for 2 years because this guy always had such a great line of bullshit every time I came close to the topic. No matter what was going on, he had some huge deal lined up that was just about to come through. He managed to string me along for 2 solid years, and I believed him every time, or wanted to. Finally, I was forced to realize that his claims were bogus, but I gave him every chance before finally axing him. Unless your boss is a total sadist, he or she doesn't want to fire you or cause hardship to your family. If you think you're in danger of being fired, take control of the situation and ask your boss for a meeting. Make sure you ask for the meeting at the right time. Tell your boss you want to make sure you are communicating and doing your job to everyone's satisfaction. Of course, if your boss is a sadist or just a lousy communicator, you've still got a problem. In that case, fire your boss and get a better job. There's no sense in trying to cope with a bad situation that will never improve. I never try to dissuade people from quitting. If they don't want to be here, I don't want them to be here either. No one has ever come to me with an ultimatum. People see how it works here, and if it doesn't suit them, they move on. Sometimes it happens quickly. A qualified and experienced receptionist worked here for a grand total of 6 hours. She realized right away that the pace just wasn't suited to her, and she very politely told us so and left. I appreciated her quick thinking and efficient decision-making skills. She'll have a successful career somewhere else. Every new hire is a gamble. Some people give such great interviews that you're ready to make them vice presidents on the spot, until you realize that their true talent is simply giving a great interview. That's why, in a sense, every new hire is a gamble. Impressive credentials don't always add up to a great performance or a good fit. Non-existent credentials don't necessarily mean a no talent. Being circumspect helps a lot and keeps you from being surprised. People can offer an interesting mix of pros and cons. Time will do the weeding out for you. All you have to do is pay attention. What I look for in employees is a sense of responsibility that goes beyond what is merely sufficient. Some people do the bare minimum, and some people will actually be concerned about the organization as a whole. They see themselves as having a direct relationship to the success or failure of the company they work for. They believe they are important, and their work shows it. If you can instill this sense of worth in your employees, you will have a tip-top team working for you. People who take pride in their work are the kind you want to have around, and the kind I like to keep around. I especially like employees who spend, and more importantly save, the company's money as if it was their own. Companies suffer when employees don't make enough of an effort to control costs. The employees who feel a personal responsibility for their budgets, who view the company's bottom line as an extension of their own personal savings account, are often the ones who get the best results. If you let your boss know that you're watching out for his or her bottom line, you'll always be appreciated. I respect employees who can think on their feet. So does George Ross, my senior counsel. His assistant, Carol Berkowitz, was helping out at the front desk one day when she received a call from a stranger who said she was about to commit suicide. Carol deemed the call credible and took a few moments to listen to the distressed woman. Carol asked her where she was from, and the woman replied that she lived in Southern California, not far from the beach. Carol responded, "You live in California, near the beach. Do you know how cold it is in New York today? It's 8 degrees outside, and that's without the wind chill. I almost froze just getting to work. If I were you, I'd go out right now, take a long walk on the beach, and sit in the sun for a while. That's what I'd do if I were you." The woman instantly calmed down and thanked Carol for being so nice to her. That's the kind of person we like to have around. A certain amount of personal ambition is necessary, but not to the point where it undermines the common goal of the company. If your group can't work together, you won't accomplish much. I don't like backstabbing. It's not necessary, and it's insulting to me. I have eyes and ears and instincts, too. I can assess people and situations for myself. If people have time to be petty, it's an indication they're not busy enough with their work. You can't expect to be a valuable employee if you don't make yourself valuable. Think about it. What do you contribute to the welfare of the organization? Are you instrumental in keeping it humming and moving forward? Do you work wholeheartedly or half-heartedly? Are you just going through the motions and hoping no one will notice? The only person you ever fool is yourself. You can't fool others, even though you might think you can. A lot of people say they're going through the motions because their position isn't challenging or rewarding and there's no room to grow. It's a dead-end situation. That might very well be. If so, look elsewhere for a company that could offer you a promotion in your particular area of interest or expertise. There are times when you should move on and situations in which the only way up is out. Ideas are welcome, but make sure you have the right one. If you run a company, make yourself accessible to your employees. If they feel they can bring ideas to you, they will. If they feel they can't, they won't. You might miss out on a lot of good ideas, and pretty soon you might be missing a lot of employees. I allow people to run their ideas by me. I don't have a lot of time, so they have to be prepared and succinct. I'm sure that's the protocol for any busy CEO. So if you're going to be bold enough to present your idea, make it as clear as possible and don't take it casually. Think of it as a presentation that could cost you a lot of money if you were to lose the client. Your boss's time is important, and you won't win any points by wasting it. Learn to recognize the fine line between being pushy and being intelligently assertive. It can be an issue of timing. Pay attention to what's happening around you and pace yourself according to that rhythm. I try to develop a tempo when I'm working. Someone who interrupts it is not going to receive a warm welcome. Also, remember this. The boss has the big picture. You don't. So if your idea doesn't meet with hurrahs, it could very well be that a similar idea is already in development or that your idea is not in step with plans that have already been made. This shouldn't discourage you because your initiative will always be noticed. But recognize when not to press an issue and don't expect a lengthy explanation of why. I like people who don't give up, but merely being a pest is detrimental to everyone. Once again, fine-tune your discernment. Know when to ease up. Keep your antennae up for another idea and a more appropriate opportunity. Sometimes we hesitate with good reason. There was one former employee who I liked a lot, but he reminded me of a jumping bean. He couldn't keep still for more than 3 seconds at a time. Even riding in the car with him became an ordeal because being in an enclosed space seemed to warm him up even more, and then he'd really get going. I finally learned to avoid him as much as possible, and that's too bad, because he was a great guy. But enough is enough. Too much will cause people to tune you out or wish that you would move to another state. Last I heard, the jumping bean was living in Montana. I only hope they have enough space there to contain him. And every time I hear about UFO sightings in Montana, I have to laugh. I know who it is. One last thing. If your boss says no to an idea, pay attention. Most likely, there's a good reason. No one disregards a terrific idea. It just might not be the right terrific idea for the company you're with. Maybe you're meant to go off on your own as an entrepreneur. Let that be an indication to you. It could be the beginning of your career rather than the end of it. Focus on the talent instead of the title. People who work for me know there's a lot more to me than my public persona. I'm not one-dimensional, and if you realize that the people around you aren't either, you'll be utilizing the hidden potential that just about everyone has. Whether they want to use it or not is up to them to a certain extent, but it's also up to a leader to recognize it, or at least to give it a chance to unfold. Most people don't like to stagnate, and if you want to keep your company moving forward, look around you now and then for fresh possibilities within your organization. Never let someone's job title be the sole indication of their worth. People at the Trump Organization have transcended their positions on many occasions. Matthew Calamari, the Executive Vice President of Operations, started as a security guard. After getting to know Matthew, I realized he had a lot more to offer than his job title warranted, and he has proven me right. He's a dedicated and trustworthy worker, and any CEO in his right mind would want to have him around. As an executive vice president, he is in charge of building operations and runs my entire security organization. He is in charge of major building projects with his brother Michael and Andy Weiss. Their most notable recent accomplishment is the new building on the site of the former Delmonico Hotel at Park Avenue and 59th Street. I'm calling it Trump Park Avenue. Catchy, right? Vinny Stelio, who was hired by Matthew Calamari, started as my bodyguard and is now a vice president. He has just what it takes to be an effective executive, which was clear to me, if not immediately to him. Vinny would often drive executives, architects, and contractors up to Westchester to look at developments I was building. Now they report to him. I am perhaps the largest owner of land in Westchester County, and now it's Vinny who keeps his eye on it all. John Tutelo, president of Trump Model Management, our modeling agency, started as a booker and now has what many guys would consider a dream job. Meredith McIver, who made the writing of this book a pleasure instead of a headache, started out as a media assistant. I recognize that her talents encompass much more. Of course, it takes talent to deal with me and everyone else every day, but especially me. I could have hired an outside collaborator to help me with this book, but why spend time looking outside the organization when you have all the people you need right beside you? Very often your resources are greater than you might think. I don't like it when people underestimate me, and I try not to underestimate anyone else either. People are multifaceted, and it's important to let them function in a way that will allow them to shine. Most people would rather succeed than fail, but sometimes the leader has to be the catalyst for putting success into their personal vocabulary. In other words, try to see beyond a person's title. You can find talent in unlikely places. Manage the person, not the job. I once heard a story about a guy who owned an advertising agency. There was one writer who drove the other writers crazy because he would appear to be doing nothing in his office. He made no attempt to look busy. Finally, his colleagues complained to his boss about his laziness. The boss suddenly perked up and asked, "How long has he been this way?" One of the other writers answered, "For weeks and weeks he sits there and does zip. It's like he's in a coma." The boss said, "I want all of you to be quiet and not to disturb him, and every now and then ask if you can get him some coffee or some lunch or run some errands for him." Needless to say, the employees were deflated and started grumbling. Then the boss explained his rationale. "Listen, the last time he was acting this way and the time before that, he came up with ideas worth many millions of dollars. So when I tell you not to disturb him, I have a reason for it." People have different ways of achieving results. I enjoy figuring out how each of my key employees excels. If people are your resource, you'd better try to learn something useful about them. Being able to do so is what makes a good manager a great one. Some people respond well to the fear factor. Ever hear this exchange? Question: How long have you been working here? Answer: Ever since they threatened to fire me. Well, it applies to some employees. Fortunately, I seem to attract people who enjoy working, but now and then a few slugs will show up, and the loss of face or job can be a good motivator for many. That said, it will always work against you to demoralize your employees in any way. I can be tough, but most people will admit I'm fair. You can crush people if you don't weigh your words carefully. Your power as a leader should be used in the most positive way, which sometimes calls for a great deal of restraint as well as patience. I have to laugh when I hear people say, "I can't wait until I'm the big shot so I can order everyone around." It doesn't quite work that way. Abraham Lincoln made an appropriate remark that is pertinent to management. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Keep your door open. I'm always taken aback when people say, "Oh, he's got it made," as if that's the end of the conversation about a person. They seem to be saying that the person can just check out and coast because he's already arrived. To me, arriving means something that is about to begin. Graduation from college is a beginning, not an ending. Each success is the beginning of the next one. Learning is a new beginning we can give ourselves every day. A know-it-all is like a closed door. Everyone who knows me knows I keep the door to my office open. It's symbolic of the way I choose to think, and it's the way I operate. My father was much the same. He once said to me, "You know, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know." I think that has kept me young at heart more than anything else. It was an offhand comment, a quiet realization he mentioned to me one day while he was reading, but it has stuck with me for decades. Every day is a reminder to me of how much I don't know. Everything I learn leads me to something else I didn't know. Fortunately, I don't pride myself on being a know-it-all, so every day becomes a new challenge. People ask me what keeps me going, and this is probably the closest answer to the truth. If I end the day without knowing more than I did when I woke up, it makes me wonder, what did I miss out on today? Am I getting lazy? I'm a disciplined person, and this thought alone can get me going. We've all heard the phrase creature of habit. That can be good or bad, depending on your habits. I've cultivated the learning habit over the years, and it's one of the most pleasurable aspects of my life. Everyone in my family knows I'm big on education, not just Ivy League education, but all education, and for people of all ages. That also applies to me. And while I got very good grades at school, I do not have time to be a scholar. Still, it's something I aspire to in my quiet time. Possibilities unfold. The world opens up. My sister Mary Ann introduced me to the writings of Aldous Huxley. He was such a learner that when he was faced with a near-total blindness as a young man, he learned Braille and continued his studies anyway. His description of his predicament had not a trace of self-pity. In fact, he mentioned that it had offered some benefits. He could now read in bed at night, and his hands would never get cold because he could read with his hands under the covers. Learning begets learning. I'd rather be stimulated than passive. You can't wear a blindfold in business. A regular part of your day should be devoted to expanding your horizons. We live in a big world, and it's important for us to be aware of cultures other than our own. I have always lived in the United States, but I make an effort to be informed about other cultures. That's easy to do in New York City, the most diverse and exciting place on earth. Someone who had been living abroad for a few years told me upon returning home that a frequent comment about Americans is that you always know exactly where we're coming from. The flip side of this is that we rarely know where anyone else is coming from. We're very much up to snuff about our own national events, but we are less aware of what's happening in other countries. All of us need to pay more attention to events outside our own realm. We are connected to each other in so many ways, politically, commercially, socially. Perhaps one of the reasons I've been able to sell and rent apartments to people of so many foreign nationalities is that I've made an effort to understand where they're coming from. Learn something new, whether you think you're interested in it or not. That's the opposite of having a closed mind or a closed door. I can thank my father for the example he set. It was the key to his remaining young and dynamic into his 90s. It can do the same for you, if you make the effort. Think big and live large. This is the final rule of the Donald J. Trump School of Business and Management. Once you have mastered it, you are ready to graduate. It's a big world. There's a lot we don't know, which means there's still a lot to be discovered and a lot to be accomplished. The possibilities are always there. If you're thinking too small, you might miss them. In some ways, it's easier to buy a skyscraper than a small house in a bad section of Brooklyn. Either way, you'll probably need financing, and most people would rather invest in a great building than a dilapidated duplex on a dangerous street. With a skyscraper, if you hit, at least you hit big. And if you don't hit, what's the difference between losing $100,000 or hundreds of millions of dollars? Either way, you've lost, so you might as well have really gone for it. I've read stories in which I'm described as a cartoon. a comic book version of the big city business mogul, with a gorgeous girlfriend and the private plane and the personal golf course and the penthouse apartment with marble floors and gold bathroom fixtures. But my cartoon is real. I am the creator of my own comic book, and I love living in it. If you're going to think big. If you're going to live large. Part 2. Your Personal Apprenticeship. Career Advice from the Donald. Take control of the job interview. I've had some interesting experiences with job interviews over the years. Norma Forderer is a good example. I wasn't too sure about her after her first interview. It had nothing to do with her skills, but she seemed a little too prim, like she belonged on some family sitcom as the ever-so-proper type. I didn't think she could handle it here, or that she would fit with my style. Norma persisted, seeming to recognize a good match better than I did. Little did I know how deceptive first impressions could be. Norma was actually as far from fluff as you could get. So I thought, okay, maybe. Her abilities were superior to those of anyone else I had seen. As it turned out, I called her back on the same day her mother died, but Norma gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. She'd work for me for 1 month at a low salary just to see whether we clicked, no strings attached. I thought, aha, she'll never last anyway, and I can decide on someone else in the meantime. After 1 month with me, she'll be out of here for sure. The hoity-toity type just won't fly, except out the front door. Needless to say, I underestimated Norma completely. I was duly humbled, and I must add grateful for being so. She was persistent and committed to getting the job, and she did it with elegance. Ask for your raise at the right time. When it comes to your career, certain moves should not be made without careful consideration of the old and very apt saying, timing is everything. For example, if you've decided to ask for a raise, look around first. So many times employees who I like very much do the dumbest things when it comes to conversations about their salaries. Jason Greenblatt, a young and brilliant lawyer who works for me, is terrific at everything he does. But one day, I swear, he must have been wearing blindfolds and earplugs. I was having an especially tough, vicious, terrible, miserable day that seemed never-ending to me and to everyone else. It was a grand slam rotten day. No one could possibly have mistaken it for anything else. Late in the afternoon, by which time I had had enough, I heard a polite knock on my door. I yelled, "What?" in my most exasperated tone. Jason nonchalantly entered my office, completely ignoring my angry welcome, and proceeded to ask me for a raise. I could not believe a lawyer as smart as Jason could make such a dumb move. I use his real name only because Jason knows how much I like and respect him, despite his incredible faux pas. But I have to tell you that I was ready to kill him. Was he joking? It's amazing, but he wasn't. He was dead serious. I couldn't believe it. Did he get a raise? Not that day. He almost got fired for stupidity, except that I told him to get out before I really lost my temper. I also told him that although he might be brilliant, his timing for certain things needed work, and that maybe he ought to start paying attention to what was going on around him. I remember thinking to myself, did I really hire such a person? But as I said, it had been a rough day. Jason is still with me, and he gets lots of raises because he's great at what he does. But now he always waits for sunny days, blue skies, and puffy white clouds on the horizon before approaching me. I told you he was smart. The best way to ask for a raise is to wait for the right time. It also indicates to your boss that you have a certain amount of discernment and appreciation for what he might be going through himself. I need my people to be plugged into what's going on with me. What impresses me most about people is their work ethic. A certain amount of swagger is okay, it's just another form of enthusiasm, but bottom line, I look for results. When I mentioned to a salesperson that I had to cut her salary because she'd made no sales in 9 months, she just about went nuts. But some things are common sense, What would she do if she had a non-productive salesperson on her roster? If you knew your company was scheduled to give a major client presentation at 3 p.m., would you approach your boss at 2:45 to ask for a raise? Money, like comedy, is all about timing. Be tenacious. The Art of the Deal contained a chapter called West Side Story, about my acquisition of the West Side Yards, a 100-acre property fronting the Hudson River from 59th Street to 72nd Street. The chapter title was a deliberate double entendre, as I knew that the popular musical West Side Story had taken 10 years to put together. Its creative team had included no less than Leonard Bernstein, Jerome Robbins, Stephen Sondheim, and Arthur Lawrence, so whenever I experienced setbacks or delays on my West Side project, I would remind myself that I had some very illustrious company. It's now 17 years later, and it's still a work in progress. But the example set by the architects of West Side Story has served me well. You don't create a classic overnight. I'm calling it Trump Place. It's a $5 billion project, the biggest development ever approved by the New York City Planning Commission. When it's done, Trump Place will have 5,700 residential units and more than 5 million square feet of commercial space. So far, 4 towers have been completed and are occupied, and 2 additional buildings are under construction. When we're done, there will be a total of 16 buildings on the site. Trump Place is a good example of why tenacity is crucial in business. I bought the property in 1974. We've hit snags along the way and made many changes over time, but for more than 30 years, we've persisted. At times, just about every executive will appear impatient, but to build something that endures, you have to take the long view. Recently, an employee told me that the pastor of her church had used Trump Place as an example of what a firm foundation should be, whether it be in faith, family, or, as in my case, buildings. The pastor, whose church was near the construction site, would watch each building go up and marvel at the immensity of the work. Each building could be 100 stories high, he said, considering the meticulous foundation work. My publisher sent me an inspiring book by Bill Shore called The Cathedral Within, which celebrates the commitment and hope necessary to build something that endures. It might be a cathedral, like the one in Milan, which took 500 years to build, or it might be a community organization or a business. Paul Davis, the man developing Trump Place for me and my partners, is a true cathedral builder. I have rarely seen anyone work so hard or so diligently Saturdays, Sundays. He's there at all hours, paying close attention to every impeccable detail of the layouts, room sizes, and the quality of the fixtures. He's one of the big reasons for our success. Some things are worth waiting for. For me, Trump Place is one of those things. 16 beautifully designed buildings on the Hudson River, a 25-acre park, the Upper West Side as a backyard. This could prove to be my finest contribution to the city of New York. Time will tell, but I'm in no rush, and I won't stop until I'm done. Play golf. I made a lot of money on the golf course before I ever went into golf as a business. I found solutions to problems, new ideas for ventures, and even a new career. Golf has a way of giving you an equilibrium that you can't always find in the office. Doing what you love will always make you a winner. And after spending many happy hours on golf courses, I decided to build some of my own. I am now one of the busiest golf course developers in the United States, with 2 award-winning, internationally acclaimed courses fully operational, and 2 more in the works. My first course, the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach, Florida, has been home to the ADP LPGA Championships for 3 years. When I first decided to develop the most beautiful golf courses possible, I did some research and got in touch with the most respected designers in the business, the Fazio family. Just as Michelangelo had an affinity for sculpting marble, some people have an affinity for sculpting land. In this case, Jim and Tommy Fazio designed a dream come true for any golfer, not only visually, but in terms of playability. The course opened in 1999 with its waterfalls and landscapes unique to Florida. Trump International Golf Club is already a landmark course in the state and the best course in Florida. My second course was Trump National at Briarcliff Manor in New York. We moved 3 million yards of earth, the largest land excavation ever in Westchester County, and it was worth it. We were also dealing with stone, which was used for walls, and a spectacular waterfall on the 13th hole, a 101-foot cliff of black granite quarried from the property, which pumps 5,000 gallons a minute. The walls were built by my very talented stonemason, Frank Sanzo. Membership costs $300,000. I think it's a bargain. My third golf course is Trump National Golf Club in a sumptuous area of New Jersey known as Bedminster. It is being designed by the master golf course architect himself, Tom Fazio. 3 times Golf Digest has named Fazio the best modern-day golf course architect. And when you see this course, you'll know why. It will be long, big, and beautiful, and I am involved daily in the design and construction. Additional plans for this property, formerly owned by automaker John DeLorean and located in the heart of New Jersey's horse country, will include a second course and a world-class clubhouse designed in the colonial mansion style. I don't want to limit my golfing to the East Coast, so in 2002, I bought a course along 2 miles of the Pacific Ocean. What was formerly known as Ocean Trails in Palos Verdes will now be known as Trump National Golf Club, Los Angeles. The course had fallen into disrepair under its previous owners. The 18th hole fell into the ocean, so I'm rebuilding it with legendary golf course architect Pete Dye. We're also planning to build luxury estate homes on the property. When completed, this course will be the best in California. When we announced the deal, the Los Angeles Times reported, "As he has so many times before, Trump has spotted a trend to tap." True, but mostly I was following my instincts and my interests. Building golf courses is not a big business for me, and it's unlikely that I will ever do another one. I only want the best. Sometimes I will sell memberships while I'm hitting balls on the practice range. People approach me and hand me checks. One recent day at my Florida course, a group of 4 wealthy friends came to me with checks of $300,000 each. I said to myself, not bad. I'm playing a game I love and going home with $1,200,000 in my pocket. I realize that some of you don't care much about golf. Golf is one of those things that has aficionados just as opera has die-hard fans who will fly around the world to catch a certain performance. To people who don't know or like opera, that seems absurd. I can't make you love golf, but believe me, once you've had the opportunity to play on a beautiful course, it could turn you into an enormous fan, or even a passionate player, no matter how poorly you hit the ball. If anyone had told me 20 years ago that I'd become a dedicated golf course developer, I would have sent them out of the room for being ridiculous. But golf has a transforming power. It's a brain game. Yes, there is skill and technique involved, but just as important, it requires concentration and assessment. It's a great way to improve your business skills, to learn how to maneuver. It can even be equated with learning how to negotiate, which is an art in itself. Golf is also, in essence, a solitary game. Being an entrepreneur, even within a large company, is a solitary game. Ultimately, the rule here is not just to visit one of my golf courses, though you would be wise to do so, but to turn your passion into profit. The results of that passion will reward you in more ways than you ever could have expected. Passion is enthusiasm on a big scale. It is all-encompassing and consuming. People with passion never give up because they'll never have a reason to give up, no matter what their circumstances may be. It's an intangible momentum that can make you indomitable. Take out the passion, and you will have a fizzle, or perhaps an okay product at best. Add the passion, and you will be in a rarefied realm that every other passionista will recognize, and one that every person would like to enter. A friend of mine is a member of what I call the Lucky Sperm Club, born into a wealthy family. He followed his father to Wall Street, but he was a total failure. He didn't like it, and he couldn't do it. Meanwhile, he became increasingly involved in his Connecticut Country Club. He was named the head of the Greens Committee and took on the lead role in rebuilding the golf course. He loved it and was great at it. The club held a dinner for him out of gratitude for his volunteer work. I asked him, "Why don't you do this for a living? You're not for Wall Street. You're getting eaten alive there." He told me his family wouldn't understand if he quit a serious job to work on golf courses. Well, 2 years later, he took my advice, quit the Wall Street job, and is now working full-time at renovating golf courses. He says he loves getting up in the morning, and he's doing better than ever. Of course, you don't have to learn how to play golf to have a satisfying career, but no matter what you do, you must be passionate about it. Brand yourself and toot your horn. I was originally going to call Trump Tower by another name, Tiffany Tower, for the famous jewelry store next door. I asked a friend, "Do you think it should be Trump Tower or Tiffany Tower?" He said, "When you change your name to Tiffany, call it Tiffany Tower." We've all seen the power of a brand name, especially quality brand names. Coco Chanel became world famous 80 years ago by naming her first perfume Chanel No. 5, and it's still going strong in a fiercely competitive market. Her fragrance, as well as her name, has become timeless. She proved that the right ingredients can create a legend. Trump has become a great brand name due to my rigorous standards of design and quality. We all admire Rolls-Royce cars, and I see every one of my ventures as being just that elite. Being a stickler has paid off, because my buildings are considered to be the finest in the world. That may sound like bragging, but it's also a fact. I've never been one to confuse facts with fiction. In 2003, Chicago Tribune real estate columnist Mary Umberger attributed the sales for Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago to the Trump factor. Umberger reported, "The sales velocity surprises even experienced real estate players, who told me at the sales inaugural that they doubted Trump would gain enough momentum because Chicago's luxury market was, and is, in a lull." Some people have written that I'm boastful, but they're missing the point. I believe in what I say, and I deliver the goods. If you're devoting your life to creating a body of work, and you believe in what you do, and what you do is excellent, you'd better damn well tell people you think so. Subtlety and modesty are appropriate for nuns and therapists, but if you're in business, you'd better learn to speak up and announce your significant accomplishments to the world. Nobody else will. When I'm setting the price for a luxury apartment, I consider a lot of factors: the market, the location, and the competition. Then I set my own standards. Once, when some top-of-the-line apartments weren't selling, I upped the prices, way over the competition. They started selling immediately. I view my work as an art form and approach it with the same intensity and ego as any ambitious artist would. I never planned on becoming a brand name, but the fit of my aesthetic nature with each product I became involved with has resulted in an expanding network of interests. The success of the Trump name worldwide has been a surprise. It's been a good surprise. For example, using my name on a building carries with it a promise of the highest quality available and at least a $5 million price tag. That's just for the name, because it will be worth it to the developers, and they know it. That building will be up to my standards. When I remember the line from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, "What's in a name?" I have to laugh. What's in a name can be far more than either the bard or I ever could have imagined. We've all noticed the ascendancy of brand names and the power they have, from Levi's to Louis Vuitton. Some people are against this widespread branding, seeing it as another form of labeling. I see it as a viable outlet for creativity. If you're on the brink of success in your career, some snob might ask you dismissively, "You don't want to become a brand name, do you?" Anyone who asks you that does not have the big picture in focus, and they are usually just envious. I can get a project off the ground in no time now, whereas an unknown developer would require many months, if not years, to get something going. The number of people I employ to get a project finished reaches into the thousands, and those people would not have a building to work on without a developer to give them a job. Commerce and art cannot function independently. They must work together. That is the beauty of a successful brand name. If there is a downside to being a well-known name, it is that you become an easy target. The media needs to tear down what it builds up. That's just part of journalism. Stories are about heroes and villains, or success and failure. If you're a brand name, they're going to take a shot at you. It comes with the territory, and I've learned to live with it. As we say in The Apprentice, it's not personal, it's business. Fortunately, if you have the critics who matter on your side, reading the newspaper can be a lot of fun. Herbert Mouchamp, the architecture critic for the New York Times, is a scholar and an authority when it comes to buildings. To receive a compliment from him has an intrinsic value that will never diminish. When he wrote an article on Trump World Tower and described it as a handsome hunk of a glass tower, I was very honored. Here's more of what he wrote. Although Donald Trump prefers to publicize the aggressive side of his nature, it's the manly thing to do. He is also the only beauty freak at large in New York City real estate development. It's not surprising that unofficial approval of Trump's buildings should come by way of the Museum of Modern Art. The tower embodies the Misesian aesthetic through which the Modern's design department's taste was initially formulated. I hope Trump sticks with this material. Trump does better when he ignores his critics than when he pays attention to them. So don't be afraid to toot your own horn when you've done something worth tooting about. And don't believe the critics, unless they love your work.